Quick update, I was blindsided by an unexpected visit from Carol, one of Jane's girlfriends. Carol is around the same age as Jane, and the irony isn't lost on me. She hosted last week's girls' night, the very night Jane came home utterly intoxicated after using a rideshare to get back. If you've been keeping up with my posts, you already know that Jane was less than graceful after that night. Carol, an old friend from the past, was someone I had introduced to Jane years ago. In a way, it felt like an odd twist of fate that brought Carol back into our lives. Carol's parents were friends of my parents, so we go way back. I guess being married for over 20 years made Jane forget some of the foundational relationships in her life, or maybe she just thought she could get away with her secrets. My unpredictability has clearly unsettled Jane, and that evening, everything spiraled out of control. During the girls' night at Carol's house, Jane reached her breaking point. She confided in Carol about her affair, a revelation that caught Carol off guard. Apparently, even after Carol urged Jane to stop, Jane kept on talking, spilling more details than anyone could imagine. The following day, Carol reached out to Jane, only to find that Jane had no recollection of their conversation. Carol, perhaps still in shock, laid out everything Jane had confessed the night before. To my astonishment, Jane completely denied everything, claiming she hadn't said those things and insisting that Carol was mistaken. The confrontation escalated. Carol, understandably furious, told Jane she was fooling herself and demanded that Jane come clean within a week or else she would tell me directly. Then came my rendezvous with Carol. Over coffee at a small cafe, she gave me the abridged version of Jane's confession. I could see that Carol anticipated my devastation, but instead, I surprised her by revealing that I already knew the truth. I asked her who else was present during Jane's drunken confession, and she confirmed she was the only one there. I probed further, asking Carol if she had shared this shocking news with anyone else. Carol reassured me that she wouldn't discuss such sensitive information without speaking to me first. I felt a pang of guilt for putting her in such an uncomfortable position. I apologized and explained that I had my own timeline for addressing this with Jane, and I'd prefer not to involve anyone else just yet. To her credit, Carol was understanding, though I could sense her reluctance to keep quiet. I asked her as a favor not to mention it to anyone, allowing Jane to think she still had the upper hand. Carol agreed to keep things hush-hush but voiced that the second part felt wrong. I told her I would be okay and promised to reach out if I needed anything else. Deep down, I knew I'd eventually have to apologize to Carol again once she learned about my health situation. But that's a bridge I'll cross another day. So now, I find myself preparing for tomorrow's confrontation with Jane. We have our regular date night planned, and my goal is to calmly lay everything out, what I know about the affair, my health condition, and how I plan to spend my remaining time without her in my life. I'm banking on the fact that a public setting might help keep the drama contained, though I know it could just as easily turn into a chaotic explosion of emotions. Either way, I plan to update you all sometime this weekend after I've had a chance to gather my thoughts. After I confront her, I'll lay down my final ultimatum. She needs to acknowledge the truth and agree to cease all contact with me and my family. I'll be ready to see how she responds. As for the wise comments I've received, be prepared for your soon-to-be ex-wife to follow this predictable path. 1. Denial. She will vehemently deny the affair until you confront her with the undeniable proof you've gathered. 2. Emotional manipulation. Expect a waterfall of tears, apologies, and desperate pleas for another chance. She'll try to convince you that the other person meant nothing, all while professing you are the love of her life. It's all just a facade. 3. False promises. She'll assure you that she'll end the affair and do everything possible to make amends, but don't be fooled, it's just more empty promises. 4. Anger and threats. Once she realizes that you are serious and not willing to forgive her, her tears will turn to rage, leading to threats and accusations. I'm bracing myself for this emotional storm, ready to face whatever Jane throws my way. This is a crucial moment in my life, one I've been preparing for, and I'm determined to confront the truth head-on. Whatever happens next, I know I have the strength to handle it. When she learned the harsh reality, she realized she would be lucky to walk away with nothing more than a bag of flour from the pantry. The advice to be prepared resonated, yet it felt almost trivial compared to what I was facing. Honestly, I've reached a point far beyond manipulation. I'm a rock in this storm, steadfast and unwavering. I've never seen anyone handle such overwhelming circumstances with such grace. Once again, my anonymous friend, you've become an inspiration to me. I've been following your journey closely, and I relate more than you might think. I went through my second divorce last year, and like you, both of my ex-wives betrayed my trust. The pain is all too familiar, though I can't imagine the additional weight of a terminal diagnosis. I watched my best friend succumb to his illness just before my last divorce. While I don't claim to understand everything you're going through, I do have a glimpse of the heartache involved. You're managing this situation far better than most would, and I can't help but applaud your strength. One thing I want to suggest, consider giving Carol a heads up about your confrontation with Jane. It's likely that Jane will blame Carol for the fallout, so a little preparation could go a long way in softening that blow. Additionally, if you ever want to talk, don't hesitate to DM me. As for your legacy on Reddit, I'd love it if you could write a post, both here and on your profile page, about how you grew into the person capable of facing this storm with such grace, peace, and wisdom. Reflecting on my own journey, I realized that I made countless mistakes along the way. However, learning to view myself through the lens of others was transformative, guiding me toward who I am today. Props to Carol as well. Some partners would take such a secret to their graves instead of coming clean to the betrayed spouse. Thank you for your honesty and composure, it's truly remarkable. I'm relieved to see that your family is rallying around you, offering the support you deserve. As for your ex, all I can say is that karma is real. You've maintained an admirable calm despite the tempest swirling around you. I hope you can cherish the time left with your loved ones. If the end is near, may you and your family find comfort in the warmth and joy of the moments you've shared. Now, on to my fifth update. Mike Tyson once said, "Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth." That couldn't ring more true. No plan ever unfolds exactly as envisioned, and mine is no exception. Let me set the scene for you. Jane and I have a tradition of weekly date nights, often at the same restaurant. We've been going there for so long that we've claimed a regular table, a cozy spot in the back, still in the public eye but away from the bustling energy near the bar. It felt fitting to confront her in a place that had once been a haven for our relationship. I planned to have the confrontation after dessert. My lawyer, knowing the stakes, secured reservations for himself and his wife at the same time. Before the evening began, I slipped our server the payment for both parties. She's been our waitress for years, and I trusted her to keep things discreet. Carol was on standby, ready to support Jane after I left. I envisioned this conversation as a culmination of years of unspoken truths. I intended to record the encounter, ensuring I had evidence of our discussion. I wanted to lay everything bare, my diagnosis, my feelings, and the firm plans I had for my future without her. I had written a letter requesting that Jane refrain from contacting me or my family and to stay away from the farm. I would ensure the letter was witnessed, adding to its weight. Alongside it, I'd leave a briefcase filled with evidence, along with the divorce papers. Then, I would rise from the table, leaving her with the cold reality of our shattered relationship. I anticipated that she wouldn't cause a scene, her social status mattered too much for that. As the evening approached, I felt a mixture of anxiety and determination. I had rehearsed every word, every moment in my mind. This was my chance to reclaim my narrative, to step out of the shadows of betrayal and into the light of truth. I wasn't just confronting Jane, I was confronting my past, my pain, and my future. I knew that whatever came next, I was ready to face it head-on. I had the entire conversation recorded, and as I played it back, I couldn't help but cringe at how Jane gushed about our relationship. "We've been such a great team over the years," she had said with a bright smile that now felt like a distant memory. I asked her straightforwardly if I had ever mistreated her, if there had ever been any abuse. "Of course not," she replied, her voice filled with confidence. But then I asked the question that had been burning in my mind: why did you cheat on me? In that moment, her confident demeanor faltered. She stammered, claiming she didn't know what Carol had told me, insisting that whatever it was, she was wrong. I interrupted her, my heart pounding. I knew long before Carol said anything. At that point, it was as if all the preparation Jane had made to defend herself evaporated, along with the color in her face. She looked like a deer caught in headlights, staring at me, searching for something to say. "What?" she managed to ask, her voice barely above a whisper. "Just let me get through this without interruptions," I replied firmly, and she nodded, suddenly subdued. The confident woman I once knew had transformed into someone vulnerable, desperate to understand. I took a deep breath and began to explain how I had come home after my appointment with the doctor, feeling like I was racing against time to have the hardest conversation of my life with the one person I wanted to confide in. I told her about the moment I drove up to our house and saw his car parked outside. A wave of frustration washed over me as I recounted how I checked the security cameras, only to find them in privacy mode. It was then I decided to head to the farm, needing space to gather my thoughts. "Just so you know," I said, maintaining my composure, "I still have footage from that day." She almost interrupted me again, but I raised my hand to remind her to let me finish. As I laid out the details of my diagnosis and my decision not to fight the disease, I noticed the heartbreak etching itself into her features. Anger bubbled up inside me. How could she feel sorrow for me now, after everything that had happened? I called over the waitress and signaled for my lawyer to join us at the table. When they arrived, my lawyer handed me a briefcase along with a folder containing a letter. I took a deep breath and looked directly at Jane. "I want you to know that I don't want any more contact with you, my family, or the farm after I leave tonight." I signed the letter and asked the waitress to witness it. The tension in the air thickened as she watched me pass the letter to Jane. After that, I dismissed them both, turning my attention fully to her. "Here's the briefcase," I said, handing it over. "Inside are divorce papers I've already signed. You can sign them too, and we can start the proceedings." I watched as her expression shifted from disbelief to shock. "I don't expect to survive a contested divorce," I continued, my voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside. "As long as I'm alive, you can stay in the house in town, but I will be at the farm. After tonight, I won't see you again." She opened her mouth to protest, but I cut her off. "No excuses. I've already called Carol to help you home." True to form, Jane kept her composure in public, but her voice was small when she muttered a hesitant "but." I reminded her again that I was leaving and was done with this chapter of my life. After that, I walked over to the waitress and left a generous tip, then sought out the owner to apologize for not giving him a heads up about the tension I was leaving behind. As I stepped out of the restaurant, I spotted my son at the door, standing alongside Carol. She passed by me with a quick smile, but her eyes showed concern for Jane. My son grabbed my truck, and his wife offered to drive me to the farm. They stayed with me Friday night, their presence a comforting reminder that I was not alone in this. Finally, around midnight, I was able to convince them to go home. I fell asleep that night with a great sense of relief, yet I felt a renewed sense of loss. Despite everything, I had accomplished the difficult task I had set out to do. On Saturday, my family came to the farm to check on me, ensuring I was okay. Although I felt a bit coddled, it was a good day. However, the atmosphere shifted when Carol stopped by in the afternoon. "Jane fell apart Friday night," she said, concern etched on her face. "But I guess she reached out to her AP on Saturday after your conversation. It seems she finally realized the weight of her actions." As the reality of Jane's collapse sank in, I felt a mixture of sympathy and determination. I had made my decision, I was ready to embrace my future, whatever it may hold. Jane was in a rough spot, tangled up with someone who was using her, and Carol was concerned. When she reached out to me, she made it clear that Jane hadn't asked her to, but she believed that if I could just have a conversation with Jane, it might empower her to finally distance herself from me. Carol had a knack for framing her requests in a way that made it hard to say no. After some internal debate, I reluctantly agreed to meet Jane for a 2-hour discussion at the farm. I'd have my daughter with me for support, and Jane could bring someone of her choice. We agreed that the conversation would remain civil. I set firm boundaries for the meeting. I would not accept blame shifting or any minimization of what had happened. This meeting was about Jane seeking answers and finding a way to move forward. The meeting took place that morning. Jane chose Carol to accompany her, and I chose my daughter, hoping to create a comfortable atmosphere for Jane so that we wouldn't have to revisit this painful conversation in the future. My mindset was clear, I was determined to remove Jane from my life for good. As we settled into the discussion, it unfolded exactly as I had anticipated. Jane was emotional, tears streaming down her face as she apologized and tried to downplay the affair. I was having none of it. I laid out my intentions straightforwardly. "You will have a place to stay until I die," I told her. "After that, it's up to the trustees to decide what happens to the house. You won't receive anything from my estate or the trust, but you have your 6-figure pension and your trust, so you'll be fine." Then she hit me with a question that set my blood boiling: "Why won't you fight for me or us?" I had to take a moment to rein in my temper. "I just don't care about you or us anymore," I said, and I could see the impact of my words hit her like a freight train. This was the reality of the selfish mindset of a cheater. They think only of themselves, even after causing unimaginable pain to another person. They expect you to value them enough to fight for the relationship. But I was done being the person worth fighting for when they had shown no regard for my feelings or our marriage. Jane got the answers she had sought, but I knew in the back of my mind that she didn't want to hear them. I had no desire for further meetings. Each conversation only pulled me further away from my goals and the future I wanted. After our talk, Carol and Jane left, but a couple of hours later, Carol returned for a brief conversation. She had some news that made my heart race. Apparently, the affair partner had received notice from the trustees that they were converting the loan into shares of his company. Since the trust would become the majority owner, they were requesting a full forensic audit. My daughter, who had her MBA, wasn't wasting any time getting involved in this mess. It struck me as ironic that Jane had gone to the affair partner for comfort, only to realize that I had suspected all along that he was using her to try and buy the loan from me. I had picked up on offhand comments and recordings that hinted he was up to something nefarious. Now, with the paperwork filed and Jane out of the picture, his usefulness to her had vanished, and he made that clear to her. It was then that Carol confided that Jane had told her her trust was nearly exhausted. She was left with only the income from her pension. Jane had thought life with the affair partner would be more glamorous than what she had with me, but now reality was crashing down around her. I felt a mix of emotions, anger, relief, and a touch of pity for Jane. But above all, I was resolute. I had put in the work to build a life, and I wouldn't let anyone, especially not someone who had betrayed me, pull me down any further. I had made my choices clear, and now it was time to focus on my own future, free from the shadows of our past. As I sat back, I realized this was just one step in a much larger journey. I would reclaim my life, and I would do so with the support of my family. With each passing day, I felt a sense of empowerment building within me. Jane had made her choices, and I was done letting her dictate the terms of my life. It was time to turn the page and write a new chapter, one where I could finally find peace and happiness. She honestly believes that his net worth far exceeds mine. He drives flashy cars, dines at upscale restaurants, and flies first class, while my husband prefers the simplicity of his farm, where he drives an old pickup truck and we make do with economy class travel. The idea that she's planning to divorce me just as he professes his undying love for her makes my skin crawl. It's infuriating to witness her greed and shallowness laid bare for everyone to see. While she may not realize it now, I'm certain my family will eventually inform her of my true worth after I'm gone. I feel a strange sense of relief that her true colors have come to light. It allows me to take control of the situation and protect my family from her manipulative ways. Then, out of nowhere, Carol did something completely unexpected that caught me off guard. She casually mentioned that since I'm no longer encumbered, I should reach out to her if I ever need companionship. I was taken aback and challenged her, asking, "Why would you or any woman want to spend time with me, especially given my diagnosis? There's nothing long-term to offer." But she quickly countered, her tone confident and almost playful. "Just because Jane is ignorant and doesn't appreciate what she has doesn't mean other divorcees or widows wouldn't be eager to spend whatever time you have left with you. You're a remarkable man, and any time spent with you would be treasured. You'd have a line of ladies waiting, and I might as well be first," she said with a wink. I raised an eyebrow, asking, "But most won't know that Jane and I are separated." With a nonchalant shrug, she replied, "Jane doesn't want the social circles to know, but Sarah and I will make sure the truth gets out." I remained polite, telling her I'd think it over, and she leaned in, kissing me gently on the cheek before leaving. Once she was gone, I mulled over her offer. It was flattering, but I was pretty sure I didn't want that kind of complication in my life right now. I've left out a lot in my updates, but those are the highlights. Overall, I'm managing okay, but it's been an emotional roller coaster. I could really use a few days of peace and quiet, as the social groups will soon know about both the end of my marriage and my diagnosis. I know I'll soon be inundated with well wishes, and while I can't delay the truth forever, I don't want to be treated differently because of it. Life is what it is, and I have to focus on the now. So, it's time for me to start dinner and unwind this evening. I genuinely appreciate all the support I've received from friends and family. I'll do my best to go back and respond to all your messages, they mean the world to me. As I browsed through the top comments on my post, I felt a mix of anxiety and relief. One commenter mentioned they were waiting for an update all day and expressed how invested they felt in my story. They shared how relieved they were that I confronted Jane and how furious they felt when she had the audacity to ask why I wouldn't fight for her in our relationship. It infuriated me too, after everything she did. I was glad to see that her affair partner had played her. It was satisfying to know that the entire family was now aware of the truth. Another commenter praised my daughter, calling her the MVP for stepping up and taking action. I couldn't agree more. Her strength and support meant everything to me during this difficult time. The comments about Carol were equally fascinating. One reader remarked that she might not be wrong in thinking I was an incredible guy, but they found it amusing that she suggested companionship so soon after my marriage crumbled. It felt like I was watching a strange soap opera unfold, where characters popped in and out of my life at the most unexpected moments. In the days that followed, I felt a whirlwind of emotions. The social groups began to hear whispers about my marriage's collapse and my diagnosis. I knew I couldn't hide it forever. I braced myself for the onslaught of messages wishing me well, but at the same time, I feared being treated like a fragile glass figure that might shatter at any moment. I didn't want pity, I wanted understanding and, above all, the freedom to navigate this turbulent time on my own terms. As the week progressed, I made the decision to confront the realities of my situation head-on. I knew I had to focus on healing, both emotionally and physically. I found solace in the little things, taking long walks, cooking simple meals, and spending quality time with family. Those moments provided a respite from the chaos that seemed to loom over my head. Then came the day when I received a message from Carol, saying she'd heard through the grapevine that Jane had been spreading lies about our separation. She offered to help set the record straight, assuring me that she'd be there to support me, whatever I needed. I was surprised by her loyalty, but I hesitated, wondering if it was wise to entangle myself further with her. Yet, amidst the confusion, I began to feel a flicker of hope. Perhaps companionship, even in its simplest form, could help ease the loneliness that had settled deep within me. Carol had shown me a side of her that I hadn't expected, one that recognized my worth beyond mere financial status. As I considered her offer, I reminded myself that life is short, and I deserved moments of joy, even in the midst of turmoil. So, I decided to take a leap of faith and reach out to her, suggesting we meet for coffee. It was a small step, but it felt like progress, like a way to reclaim a part of myself that had been lost in the shadows of betrayal. After all, I wasn't just a dollar sign or a victim, I was a man worthy of love and respect. As I moved forward, I felt a sense of empowerment growing within me. With each passing day, I began to understand that while the road ahead would be challenging, it was mine to navigate. And maybe, just maybe, I could find solace in the unexpected connections I was beginning to forge. With a renewed sense of hope, I vowed to embrace whatever came next with open arms, ready to write the next chapter of my life.